Hi, I'm Stephanie with Schacht Spindle Company. Today we're going to talk about assembling your Schacht Matchless Spinning Wheel. So once your matchless arrives, you're going to open the box and take the wheel out. It will come with some extra packaging and some wrap to make sure that everything arrives safely, but basically it's going to look like these parts that you see on the table and the wheel here, along with this box. Inside the box, you're going to find your extra bobbins, and the matchless comes with 4 bobbins. So 3 will be packed separately, 1 will be packed on the flyer. When you unpack and unwrap, your matchless flyer, you're going to notice that it comes with a bobbin already on the flyer, along with the medium-sized whorl. The fast whorl can be found right here on the back of your spinning wheel. You'll also notice that there's a little bit of yarn spun on this bobbin. It's not because your wheel's arriving to you used, it's because every wheel is quality controlled here at the factory, fully assembled, before it's disassembled and packed back into that box to ship to you. Inside the box, you're going to find your assembly manual and instructions. You're also going to find a registration card. Now, you don't need to mail this registration card in. You can just click the QR code. It will ask you the questions about what you're registering, and you'll put all of that in. One of the things this card's very handy for is that you should keep all of your accessories together in case you need to reference them for customer service in the future. So on this little card, it has a space for you to put your serial number. So the serial number will always come labeled on the accessory box. And if you don't have the box and you're wondering where you can find that serial number, you're going to find it right here on the back of the mother of all. It's stamped into the wood, and your serial number tells you a little bit about your wheel because it's actually the date of manufacture. So you're going to see a date, something similar to the one that's on this box, which is 011225. That means it was built on January 12th of 2025. And then you're going to see this dash and another number. That number is going to tell you the number that it was put together that day. So if you have -3, that means it was the 3rd matchless that the wheel builder built that day. So if you're like me and you like to celebrate your wheel's birthday, you can put it on your calendar. We're going to jump right into the assembly manual. The assembly manual has a lot of really great instructions and tips for you, so I would encourage you to actually read through it. It is much easier to put together the wheel when you follow the instructions. In the first page, you're going to see a list of what is coming in the box. So I'm going to actually put the parts and pieces onto the table right now. And we're going to get started. To assemble your wheel, you are going to need a Phillips screwdriver. So have one handy. The first part of the instructions is going to tell you that we need to assemble the treadles. So in step 1, it's going to have you place these treadles into this orientation. Once you have the treadles on this orientation in the table, you're going to find your treadle support bar. Now, one of the things that you're going to notice is that I am facing the back of the wheel. When you assemble this, you're going to be in front of the treadles. So this treadle support bar is going to be placed onto the treadles. You're going to find these little machine screws, and when I say little, they are very tiny, along with 2 longer machine screws that we're going to be using for the brace for the treadle bar support. So in order to attach the treadles, we're going to use these small machine screws. We're going to begin with the left treadle and the innermost screw. You're going to go into the pilot hole, but not tighten that all the way. The next screw is going to go in the outermost hole, and we are going to tighten this all the way down. We're going to go back to the innermost screw and complete tightening that. And we're going to follow by inserting and screwing in the remaining screws. We're going to repeat this for the right treadle. Innermost screw, not tightened all the way. The outermost screw, tightened firmly. I'm going to go back to the innermost, give it a little tightening, and repeat those steps from your left treadle to now your right treadle. Now that we have attached this treadle bar, we are going to attach the treadle support. On to step 4, attaching the treadle support brace. We're going to attach the treadle support brace to this treadle support bar that we just attached to the treadles. You're going to find this support brace and the angle. You will place the angled section down onto the treadle bar support, and we're going to grab our 1-inch machine screws, and I'm just going to finger tighten these into the holes. Make sure that I get the threads to grab, and then I'm going to tighten these into position. Next, we're going to move on to step 5, where we're going to attach the treadle assembly to the wheel. Once we've finished putting the treadle assembly together, we're going to lay the wheel flat. And in order to do that, you're going to need a couple books, about 5 inches worth, about two sets of books. And I'm going to show you how to lay it flat so that we're working on just a really nice flat surface with the wheel. So I'm just going to set the treadle assemblies aside. And I happen to have some books over here ready to go. And now we're looking at the back of the wheel, and usually the wheel, when we're talking about the orientation, the front of the wheel will be where your orifice is, and the back of the wheel will be here where your crank and your footmen are. So we're just going to lay this wheel down. All right, I feel really comfortable with the position of this wheel right now. Up to this point, we've only used the Phillips screwdriver. You're also going to find 2 sizes of Allen wrenches that come in with the assembly wheel instructions. So we're going to take that small Allen wrench, and you're going to find a front leg bolt. So here's your front leg bolt, and we're going to use that small Allen wrench, unscrew it to remove the bolt and washer, along with this small support. After you've removed the bolt, you want to make sure that the front leg is free from this cross brace. Now we're going to need the larger size Allen wrench. So there are lower bolts on your legs that we're going to loosen. We don't want to take them all the way out, but I'm going to loosen the right leg bolt and then the left leg bolt. You're going to see this loosen. So we're going to lift this front leg up and rotate the cross brace down so that it's flat on the books. Now that we have the cross brace laying flat, we're going to actually insert the treadles. So I'm going to lift up the treadle assembly that I had put together and flip it over so that the top of the treadles is facing the top of the wheel. Then we're just going to go in at an angle so that you don't scratch your drive wheel and get the treadle assembly all the way behind the drive wheel. Now that we have the treadles behind the drive wheel, we're going to rotate the treadles up so that this space goes over the front leg, and we're going to rotate up the cross brace. Once we have the cross brace in place, we are going to use that large Allen wrench again and tighten up the rear leg bolts. Now that we have all the pieces in place, we're going to make sure that that front cross brace and the front leg are lined up and fit together. We're going to put the short rod back into that front leg, make sure all the holes line up. Then we're going to take the front treadle support, the bolt with the washer that we had removed, and now we're going to get all of those pieces to line up and use that small Allen wrench again to tighten that front leg bolt. Now we don't want to tighten it too far. Once your wheel is all put together, we'll go back through and just make sure that all of the bolts are tight. Now that we've attached the treadle assembly, we're going to flip the wheel upright so we can attach the footman. The next thing that we're going to be doing is attaching the footman. So you're going to want to locate the footman hardware. So we have 3 different parts to each of these little assemblies. We have a cotter pin that's going to hold this metal clevis pin in place, and 2 nylon washers. So let's get started. We're going to start by attaching the left footman first. And this is because it's just closer to the wheel. It'll be easier for us to attach the right footman because it's a little bit further away. So in order to do that, I'm going to take out the cotter pin and take off one of the washers. Now, this step is important. We are going to put the footman into the treadle yoke, and I'm putting the clevis pin with the washer in from the back of the wheel towards the front of the wheel. This becomes important later. After we put the clevis pin in, we're going to put the second washer back on, and then place the cotter pin through the hole in the clevis pin. This becomes important because we want to make sure that the cotter pin on the left treadle is facing towards the drive wheel, And the cotter pin on the right treadle is going to be facing away from the drive wheel. If you happen to put these in backwards, they can touch every time that the treadles go past each other and make a clacking noise. So if you sit down at your wheel and you hear that, this would be one of the first things that I would check. Now we're going to take that Footman hardware and repeat that same process for our right treadle. Take out the cotter pin, take off one of the nylon washers. We're going to line up the Footman into the treadle yoke. Now, from the front of the wheel to the back of the wheel, insert the clevis pin with the washer. Place the second washer onto that clevis pin. And now, press that cotter pin in the hole to hold that on. Now your treadle assembly and Footman attachment is complete. Now that your wheel is fully assembled, we're going to go through and tighten all of the bolts. First, in the front on the treadle support bar, that's your small Allen wrench. We had adjusted the rear leg bolts, so we're going to want to make sure those are nice and tight. And then we're just going to go up the wheel and just make sure that everything feels really nice and snug. And I'm going to turn it around and get the other side leg. Now that we have the wheel all tightened up, we're going to put the flyer on. So the flyer comes with the bobbin on, and you'll notice that the small end of the bobbin is to the back of the flyer. Remember, the front of the flyer is always where the orifice is. And the medium-sized whorl. And it really doesn't matter whether you like to have your whorl on with the small groove facing the bobbin or the large groove facing the bobbin. Either way is going to work. We're going to put the flyer onto the wheel by rotating the front maiden down. We're going to put the back of the flyer into the rear bearing, and you'll notice I have the 2 cotton drive bands over the rear bearing right now because the wheel is shipped to you in double drive. That's why we want the small end of the bobbin facing the back, the whorl. Now we're going to put the front maiden up over the front of the flyer shaft. Once it's into position, we're going to press down on this quick release lever, and that will hold your front maiden in position. Now that your wheel is all put together, let's talk about some fine tuning of your wheel. Adjusting the front feet is a really handy way to level out your wheel. So if your wheel seems like it's rocking back and forth, you can make adjustments to the height of the feet. There are 2 parts to making this adjustment. One is the actual foot itself and the foot height. And you do this by adjusting the height of the foot by screwing it into the treadle support bar to raise it up or loosening it out. One of the important parts about this adjustment is this lock screw. There's a lock screw right here, and that will hold the position that you choose of the height of the foot. This is also another really important thing to check when you transport your wheel. These tend to become loose, and you always want to make sure when you arrive at your destination that you've tightened up those lock nuts so you don't lose that foot. One of the fine-tuning adjustments that may need to be made on your wheel, and I find this usually after you've kind of gone through a breaking in period, is that there's a space here between when the treadle is in its lowest position and the rear cross brace. Well, once the footmen kind of break in, this can drop down a little bit, and you'll know if you need to make an adjustment to the treadle height. If you have the treadle in the furthest down position, you'll hear a little clunk, 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 and that's because it's hitting this rear cross brace. So you can also have the opposite happening where the treadle kind of tends to be a little bit too high, and it's going to hit the drive wheel right here when the treadle comes to its highest position. It's going to be the same diagnostic as the treadle being too low. When you have your treadle at the highest position, you'll hear a clunk, clunk, clunk. So we want to talk about how do we adjust the height of our footmen to either raise up the position of the treadle or lower the position of that treadle. Since the right treadle is just a little bit easier to get to, I'm going to show you here how you would adjust that height. We're going to do that through adjusting the height of the treadle yoke. In order to do that, we will take out the cotter pin, take off the nylon washer. We're going to push out the clevis pin with washer and set those aside. Now, remove the footman from the treadle, and you're going to see this treadle yoke. The treadle yoke is threaded on the bottom, so if we want to bring up the height of the treadle, we are going to tighten clockwise. Now, this is too hard for me to tighten by hand, so I'm going to use my screwdriver for leverage and tighten that yoke by turning it clockwise. I would suggest that you make these adjustments in very small increments. Reattach your treadle, try it, and if you need to make more of an adjustment, make more of an adjustment. The movement of the treadles between the rear brace support and the drive wheel is a very tight tolerance, so you want to adjust these very sparingly. Once you get it into the right position, you're going to reinsert that clevis pin. Remember, we always want the right treadle to have the cotter pin facing out, so that clevis pin will come in from the back to the front, reattach the washer, and pop in the cotter pin. And you're ready to spin. When the front maiden is in position, you need to have a spacing of 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch between the shoulder here of the flyer shaft and the front bearing. So when we place this and set it at the factory, we set it to have about a fingernail's width between that shoulder and the front bearing. This is done, and this spacing is set by this set screw on the back of your front maiden. So if when you put your front maiden up onto your flyer and you tighten your quick release lever, if there is no space between this shoulder and the bearing, this flyer will not turn freely. You will notice this because it's going to feel like you're trying to treadle through mud. That is because you're going to have resistance of this bearing pressing up against the shoulder. If you need to make that adjustment, what you will do is just release the quick release lever, bring down the front maiden, grab your large sized Allen wrench that comes with your wheel, and if you need it to be closer to this shoulder, we're going to screw this clockwise and bring this screw further into the front maiden. If this front maiden is too tight, we're going to do the opposite, put the hex wrench in and turn it counterclockwise. that will bring the set screw out slightly, increasing the space between the shoulder and the bearing. Once you get the position that you'd like, you're ready to spin. Now that we have our wheels set up, we're going to want to put the drive band on. The wheel comes in what's called double drive. So we will release that front tension, bring the back of the flyer out. I had those two bands resting on my bearing, but I'm going to want them to just go over the flyer shaft between the whorl and the bobbin until I get the flyer inserted back into the wheel. Whoops. So once I've got it in, I'm going to put that quick release lever down, front maiden stays up. Now I have my drive bands. So a double drive band is one continuous band that's going around your drive wheel, it's coming back up, it's going over your whorl, it's going back down around the drive wheel again, and then it's going to go around your bobbin. So this is one continuous band going around both your whorl and your bobbin. The tension is adjusted by what's called your drive band tension knob, and in order to tighten it, you're going to want to turn it clockwise, and to loosen the tension, you'll turn it counterclockwise. This knob is on a threaded piece that goes through your rear bearing for your flyer. That part going up and down is going to be what's adjusting the tension here. The tension in double drive is what allows you to have take up on your yarn onto the bobbin. So the tighter the drive band is in double drive, the faster it's going to be pulling your yarn onto the bobbin. So we talked about the wheel coming to you in double drive. Now we're going to talk about how to set the wheel up in Scotch tension. The first step that we're going to do is to take off the drive band, the double drive band that we have on the wheel. Now you do not need to cut this off. You will actually leave the drive band on your wheel. I'm going to show you how to tie it onto the front leg. So if you decide to switch back and forth between Scotch tension and double drive, you already have the drive bands ready to go. So this is what you do to attach this drive band to the front leg. So we'll bring the length of the drive band down to the bottom of the front leg, and I just hold those two kind of ends together, and I'm going to just loop, and it's almost going to be like finger knitting, where I'm going to bring that loop around the back, and I'm going to pull those ends through that loop just to tighten it onto the front of the leg. I'm going to bring that loop back around to the front and do it again. And get that nice and tight, bring it around to the back, and once you have, a short length here, we're just going to tighten it up, and we can let it just rest here on this front leg until we're ready to use double drive. You're going to take your Scotch tension spring and string, and then we're going to tie on a new drive band. The next step for setting your wheel up in Scotch tension is to release the front maiden, and we're going to take off the flyer. Because one of the important things to remember is that we have the small end of the bobbin towards the back right now, and when we change over to Scotch tension, we're going to need to take that flyer off. We're going to take the bobbin off and flip it around. And it's best to remember to do that now. Put your whorl back on and set your flyer to the side. Next, we will be installing the spring and string. So with the front maiden down and the flyer removed, we have a little bit better access to this channel at the top of the mother of all. This is where our Scotch tension spring and string will lie. So we're going to insert the end of the spring and string, and I like to use my orifice hook because it's a pretty tight little spot to pull that string up. So we can just rest it over the rear bearing for now, but we need to attach it to the adjuster peg. So the adjuster peg, as we rotate it, you're going to see a hole. So there's a little bar that goes through the mother of all, and we're going to go over that bar with the other end of the Scotch tension spring and string. Once you've inserted this nylon string through the hole in the tensioner peg, we're going to bring it out and tie a knot. I like to tie actually 2 just to make sure that I have a big enough knot that it doesn't go back through that tensioning peg. And I'm just using small little overhand knots and tightening them down. So you can see I have a nice big knot here. I'm going to pull that up so it's tight against the tensioning knob and start to rotate the tensioning knob. I like to rotate mine in a clockwise direction because I always think righty-tighty, and the tighter your tension, the stronger and faster the yarn's going to draw on. Now that we've installed the Scotch tension spring and string, and we've changed the bobbin from the small end to the large end facing the back, we can put the spring and string around the whorl, and the spring and string will then go around the large part of the bobbin in the back. We'll insert the flyer back into the bearing, bring up the front maiden, attach the quick release lever. So now we're almost ready to spin. When we spin in Scotch tension, you want to have one drive band going over your whorl and around your drive wheel. I'm going to show you how to tie that now. Hi, we're going to continue to tie a drive band on for Scotch tension. Like I said before, Scotch tension only requires one drive band to go around the whorl and then around the wheel. So in order to tie this, we want to get the flyer in a good position. So when we're spinning, we want the flyer here to be parallel with the mother of all. And we want that to happen because we want the front of the flyer and the back of the flyer to be sitting in the bearings as they were designed. So when we tie on the drive band, one thing that we'll want to do is slightly lower the level of the flyer. By turning the tension knob in a counterclockwise rotation, we are going to be lowering the rear bearing, therefore lowering the angle of the entire flyer. We want it to be just down slightly in the back when we're tying on a new drive band. So I always find it's helpful if you don't have an extra set of hands around to use a piece of tape. And what you'll want to do is tape the drive band to the drive wheel. Then we're going to bring that drive band up and over the whorl. Now you can choose whether you want to be in the small position of the whorl or the large position. It really depends on which one that you like to spin in the best as to using a general drive band. Earlier I talked about how to tie on your extra drive band onto the front leg. So you probably, while you're spinning, might end up having several different drive bands tied to your front leg on a matchless, because every time that you change your whorl, it's going to change that diameter. And like I said, we really want that flyer to be parallel with the mother of all while we're spinning. So, you know, don't be scared to tie on a bunch of different drive bands so that you can have that really good position of your flyer while you're spinning. So, like I said, it doesn't matter whether we're going to go over the large groove or into the small groove. Make sure that tape's going to hold. And we're just going to gently go over the slot in the whorl, around the drive wheel, and we are going to come back up to where we have the drive wheel taped and the drive band, the end of the drive band there. We're going to have to use a square knot, which can be difficult for some of us. I know it's right over left, left over right, but sometimes that doesn't really make sense in my brain. So we're going to want to have enough space to be able to tie that on. So what I'm going to do is just take my scissor and cut the drive band so I know that I have enough to make the knot, but I don't need this extra. All right, now we're going to tie the knot. All right, we're going to tie the drive band in a square knot, and I'm going to do it really as tightly as I possibly can. The drive band will loosen up over time, and that will give us more of that parallel to the mother of all. All right, so I'm going to take the left one coming from underneath and put it over the right. I'm going to use my thumb to hold that there. I'm going to use the one that I went over with to go over the one that's now on the left. Snug that knot up. And to make sure that I've actually tied the knot correctly, I always give both ends of the drive band a good tug. Now we're going to cut off the excess, and if you know that you've tied the knot tightly, you don't have to worry about cutting it relatively close to that knot. Once we've tied the drive band securely, we're going to go back to the drive band tension knob, and we're going to now go clockwise with the rotation so that the flyer becomes parallel again with the mother of all. In Scotch tension, one of the things that is less important is how tight the drive band is. It's more important to have your flyer parallel to the mother of all. As long as this drive band is turning the whorl and turning the flyer, it's doing its job, and it's not having any impact on the yarn that you're spinning, because we're doing that now through the Scotch tension spring and string. That is what's going to create that tension, that's that draw on tension to bring your yarn onto your bobbin. Okay, there are several points that you can oil on your matchless. If you read the instructions, it's going to tell you all of the points to oil. The hardest to get into are the ones back here on the drive wheel bearings. So if you stick your little needle nose in here and put just a drop of oil in there, that's enough. And then in the front here, you can put a drop of oil on that bearing too. Next, we're going to talk about oiling your matchless. I like to start at the flyer. The first place to oil is right behind the front bearing on the front maiden, next to the shoulder of the flyer. Just a tiny little drop will do it. Then I like to move from the front to the back, and the next place to oil is on that flyer shaft right in front of the bobbin. Then I'm going to move the bobbin forward slightly. Next we're going to move to behind the bobbin with a little dab onto the flyer shaft. Moving back, we'll want to do just a touch at that rear bearing. That completes all the points of contact that you should oil, and the question usually becomes, how often should I oil? I would say definitely in between every full bobbin you want to add some oil, or if you're a couple days in between spinning, when you sit down, just give it a tiny touch in those 4 spots. In the instructions, you may notice that it also mentions the points of contact on the footman and the crank. On the right footman, the points of contact that it mentions in the manual to oil are right here where the footman is touching the cranks. You can do that on both of the footmen, but I will caution you to use it very, very sparingly. Oil over time, if you use it excessively on your footman, will make the footman stretch out. This is when you would need to refer to the video of how to adjust the height of your footman.